You're watching College Sports Rushes the 10 on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome to the 10, presented by Bet Rivers, a weekly Big Ten basketball podcast, part of the Bet Rivers Network. It was a good day for the Big Ten Conference yesterday, 4-0. And we have more bets to make, gentlemen. Doug Kezirian, Troy Machir here with me. I'm your host, Greg Waddell. We'll go around the horn quickly. Takeaways from the first day of the NCAA tournament, Big Ten specific or not. Doug, what'd you take away from yesterday?
Like you said, successful 4-0 trip for the conference. You can't overreact to games. As big as the field starts out and it feels like Sunday night, there are only 16 games on Thursday and Friday each day. So you have some blowouts, you have some nice finishes, obviously some ATS drama, whether it be the side or total, but you can't get too deterred. And maybe I'm just hung up on some wagers and betting angles that I had that didn't materialize. I watched all the games. It's just it's relatively small sample size, all things considered.
My takeaway from day one of this entire tournament, but definitely Big Ten specific, was I think the whole country played pretty true to who they are. I mean, Michigan played the hits. Let's get down to a one-possession game and pull it out again. Purdue's 2 stars superstarred, and they had some issues elsewhere, but it was enough. I think you saw Wisconsin's offense on full display, UCLA's defense, toughness on full display. And then at a national level, I think most of the teams that were supposed to win did. It was a pretty chalky Thursday, but I think this could be a pretty chalky tournament. There's a lot of elite teams at the very top of this sport that I think lived up to that on day one, both in and outside of the Big Ten. Troy, any takeaways from the Thursday that opened the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, at the beginning of tournaments, we tend to do a 30,000-foot view look at conferences and whether or not the conference is performing up to speed. And, with the SEC having 14 teams, that's certainly the focus. On Thursday, the ACC with Louisville and Clemson both losing in brutal fashion, that kind of shed a light on how weak the ACC is. Obviously, the SEC is going to be a discussion point. The Big Ten having 4 teams all win fairly comfortably. And most importantly for this show, covering in all 4 games. I think that's a really big thing and something that things are going to talk about, even though I don't necessarily believe conferences win national championships. I do think athletic directors and commissioners love to tout conferences, but we do, you play them, you play your opponents 2 times, in some of the conferences for the last 2 months. So there is some, familiarity and noteworthiness to how conferences perform in the NCAA tournament. But all in all, it was a great start for the Big Ten.
It must be a completely different vibe this morning for any ACC basketball betting shows. Not a problem for us today, gentlemen. 4-0 against the spread on Thursday. Okay, we've got 4 games on Saturday. We will go through each one, give you a handicap, give you our best bets. Let's start with Purdue and McNeese. Purdue, 5.5-point favorites, minus 250 on the money line at Bet Rivers. McNeese, 2-1 as underdogs on the money line. Our total is 143.5. Doug, what are you thinking?
I was on the over in Purdue's opener, and really just the way the game played out and the ball bouncing a certain way, it didn't get there, right? It was on pace, and then the second half, just Purdue milked the shot clock and hit buzzer beaters routinely, or got an offensive rebound, wisely kicked it out, burned some clock. Braden Smith was fantastic. And it just was one of those games that broke a certain way for Purdue, and give them all the credit. They were well rested, having been eliminated in the conference tournament, which many of you guys and we all discussed, that would be sort of an advantage for a team that lacked the depth, but has 2 first-team All-Big Ten performers, including the Player of the Year in Smith. So I'm just reluctant to overreact. I'm still going to lean to the over here. I think McNeese was as bizarre of a game as you can play, right? The biggest rock fight you'll ever see in the first half, and then the second half just way over the total. And then we had crazy ATS or over-under drama at the end. But give Clemson credit. I still think the Will Wade component, job searching, all that is still a factor. Clemson just couldn't hit a shot. I don't think that was Will Wade putting in the hours of game planning on video all week. I just think it's the madness that is March. So I'm still going to play a little bit. I lean to the over. I do think Purdue is ripe to get beat. I just don't know if it's McNeese State, although I was impressed with McNeese just during the game. So I lean dog and I lean over.
Yeah, I think things have really broken how you would want if you're a Purdue backer or a Purdue fan here, right? You've got a 12 seed standing in the way between you and a Sweet 16, a 12 seed whose coach is leaving for another program and is being extremely transparent about it. I do think, sometimes motivational factors can be overblown in handicapping sports. I don't think this is one of those situations. And I also think the mass population that watched this sport seemed to incorrectly interpret what Will Wade's team was going to do and approach mentally of the first game that they had against Clemson, because everybody sort of accepted he's out. This isn't going to help this team. At the time, my take was this team is full of seniors. 60% of their top 7 or 8 are gone anyway. I don't think those guys are overly upset that Will Wade is leaving. And the ones that, have an extra year of eligibility that play for him are probably pretty pumped up to come to NC State with him if he's opening the door. And that's something he's talked about at the podium. So for me, I actually loved McNeese against Clemson. That's yesterday's handicap. For this game, I kind of throw that out the window because logistically, let's just be honest about it. Will Wade is not served well to have to coach at this program for another week. For another day, that's a little different. Let's go out on a high note, a little bit of a statement. But if you're taking a new job, it is not a good thing to be a week late to that at this point. And even if these players are going to get up for this, I do think that's hanging over this a little bit. It's a big time opportunity for Purdue, I think, in this spot. The only issue for me is I do think McNeese's athletes are going to cause problems for the Purdue role players. You saw Cam Heide with a double-double in the first game of this tournament. He was able to fly around. Miles Colvin hanging on the rim with just kind of letting their jumping ability win them possessions in this game. That's not going to happen against McNeese. McNeese is going to be more athletic than Purdue at most spots on the floor. It will truly come down to Purdue's stars' ability to execute. Braden Smith was really inefficient from the floor in game 1. It didn't ultimately matter because High Point just gave up too much on the boards. And, this game could play out similarly. McNeese is very good on the offensive boards, but they're very bad on the defensive boards. Kind of profiles similarly to what High Point did, and Purdue was able to dominate that game. So at 5.5, it's a stay away for me. I tend to think that Purdue will get the job done and has a huge opportunity given the Wade situation. But if there is any value here for me, it might be on McNeese 2-1. If you think that the matchup's a good one, I actually like that value. Troy, I'll throw it to you for some betting insights. Any trends you've got for this one?
Will you be surprised to know that the betting public at Bet Rivers is all over the 12 seed? A very popular pick, McNeese State, not just in their first round game, but here against Purdue. This has not been a stay away for the public. With 59% of the money is on McNeese State to win outright, plus 200. I think that is a little long for them just because, I feel like the book would know that the public is going to be all over this and you can get them at 2-1. I was a little bit surprised it wasn't at plus 175, something like that. Now, 66% of the tickets are on Purdue to win. But in games like this, it is going to be more public money that we take a look at. Spread wise, people love the Cowboys to cover. 83% of the money and 88% of the tickets. That is not an insignificant amount of strength of action at Bet Rivers backing the Pokes here against Purdue. And the interesting one for me, 89% of the money and 92% of the tickets are on the under 143.5. I think Doug alluded to leaning towards the over. I think there's an interesting stat here on the under, and that's each of McNeese State's last 6 games against teams ranked in the Ken Pom top 100 have gone under 141. And that's interesting because, McNeese State playing in the Southland does not play a lot of top tier competitions. There's no teams in their conference that are in Ken Pom top 100. So their non-conference games are really what we're looking at when they're playing up. Their game on Thursday and all those games a little bit slower, a little bit, less points going in the basket. So I think the under here, especially when you see how inconsistent Purdue has been, the struggles that Braden Smith has had over the last week, I think the under here is an interesting play, but the public will be all over McNeese State as you'd expect. This team has Cinderella written all over them with their cool team manager bringing out the boombox. This is one of America's teams for this tournament, and I expect the money and the tickets at Bet Rivers to keep coming in.
We need our own Aura Con, by the way. I'm going to send an email to the Bet Rivers higher-ups, going to see if we can get somebody on this program to kind of kick things off for us with the boombox. We'll see. That should be a wildly entertaining game, gentlemen. A lot of ways you can bet it. A lot of split opinions on that one, but entertainment-wise will be fun to watch. Let's move to the second game in the Big Ten on Saturday. The Michigan Wolverines against the Texas A&M Aggies, a classic 4-5 matchup here. Michigan, a slight underdog, plus 112 on the money line. A&M minus 2.5 against the spread, minus 136 on the money line for the Aggies. Our total is 140.5. Doug, what's your first stance on this one?
I was really impressed with both teams' victories. Michigan obviously took every punch from UC San Diego, opened up with a nice lead, came ready to play, right? Sometimes you're a big school, blue blood, and you play not to lose and you play tight, especially when it's a late game and you have all day to think about the pressure. And I was really impressed with the Tritons. Just they belonged, and I just thought they were completely underseeded. This should have been a single-digit team, and all the metrics looked the part, right? They looked the part of all these metrics. But I was also equally impressed with Texas A&M. Yale did not play its best game, and I think the Aggies deserve credit, but they were so incredibly well prepared. Buzz Williams didn't mess around. Jay Wright talked about it right after the game, just saying how Yale's a very difficult team to prepare for. You can only watch so much video of all their unique offensive cuts and the slip screens and everything, and I thought A&M was just on top of it. But we also saw A&M get very fortunate because they were able to dictate their pace and impose their will with they shoot threes and they crash the board right away. They don't expect to make them. And that size advantage was so distinct against a team from the Ivy League. That's not going to be the case against Michigan's front line. I love the under in this game. I think it's just going to be way too high, quick turnaround. Both teams clearly took their opening opponent seriously, and then both are well coached. But obviously, both coaches of the A&M Michigan are well coached. But it's still tough to get with a turnaround of less than 48 hours to get your guys ready to play. I just think it's going to be one of those measured offensive possessions. Both teams really good defensive squads. I mean, A&M, Ken Palm, top 10. And Michigan, top 15. So we're talking about defense as the calling card more than anything. And Greg, like you said, or I forget what you guys said, but Michigan, true to script, plays close games as we've seen over the last couple of months for the most part. So I was really impressed, but I think this game's an under, man. I really, really do.
Yeah, I also like the underdog. That was my play here. And I could see arguments for either side of spread betting or just taking the money line here. I think it's going to be a great game. A&M, I would frame it as this. As someone who's watched every single Michigan basketball game this year, I have a rooting interest in this team. That's my team. A&M is the nightmare matchup for Michigan that people thought UC San Diego was. You don't beat Michigan by turning them over. That's just a trait that they do in their wins. That's not how you beat them. They just do that. You beat them by dominating them on the boards, as Illinois showed a couple months ago. And A&M is the best offensive rebounding team in the sport, has been for 3 seasons. This group of personnel is all-time elite, generating second chances on the boards. And the one caveat that doesn't make me jump on the Aggies here, to be honest with you, because I think they're going to just punk Michigan down low like that, is that it's hard to prepare for 2 true 7-footers. And I think San Diego found that out the hard way last night. They ran great offense, as you said, Doug. I was pretty impressed by what they did. But I thought they missed a lot of relatively open shots they normally make because they were bothered by Michigan's size. A&M may run into those issues. Wade Taylor is a small guard that can go extremely streaky. You could see him go 2 for 15, or you could see him go 10 for 15. If he goes 10 for 15, good luck. But Michigan's pretty huge positionally in the guard spots. They're huge in the front court, as we know. For as good of a rebounding team as Texas A&M is, they go 6'8", 6'7" in the front court. I mean, I expect them to still rebound, but it's not necessarily as easy as it sounds when Danny Wolf, who is a great rebounder, decides to get physical. Vlad Golden imposes his will as well. So I think for that reason, we're going to see a lot of missed shots in this game. I think Michigan's size will bother the Aggies. I think Michigan is an offense that can go extremely cold at times, as the second half showed us last night. This will be a game A&M tries to slow down as the game wears on, and Michigan may try to run. But even last night, you saw Dusty May encouraging his team to value possessions and slow it down. now that the postseason is here, I think you're going to see them a little more comfortable playing in the half court. Doug, for that reason, I am rocking with you on the under. I think it is the smart play here. Troy, what do the trends tell us for Michigan A&M?
Michigan at plus money is interesting here because they have played very well over the last 2 weeks. We spent the previous 2 weeks dogging Michigan as being suspect and potentially fraudulent, but they've played nothing but really high quality basketball. At what point do we have to, really look at Michigan as a threat to continue to advance? This isn't, a first year head coach who's never been to the tournament. Dusty May has been here before. Vlad Golden has been here before. This is a team with, a new team identity, but they have the things you need in March. And, they're going up against the team in Texas A&M. Like you said, Buzz Williams teams are always one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country, dating all the way back to his time at Marquette when he had undersized teams with Jimmy Butler and Jay Crowder. Those teams were amazing rebounders, same at Virginia Tech, and even when he had Tyler Davis and some bigger guys at Texas A&M. You guys mentioned, the under here, 140.5. Each of Michigan's last 6 games against SEC teams on a neutral court have produced a total of over 142.5. So you're looking at, high quality, non-conference games, potentially, preseason tournaments, or even, if there's a Big Ten SEC challenge or something like that. 6 of, Texas A&M's last 7 games have gone over the total points line. So that interesting trends to, lean to the over when you guys are thinking about going under. The public is split at Bet Rivers. 76% of the money's on the under, but 64% of the tickets are on the over. In terms of spread, just like you said, this is a tricky one to handicap. 51% of the money and 52% of the tickets on Texas A&M. So it's really a toss up. And then as we go back to the money line, 89% of the money is on Texas A&M, currently at minus 136, but 85% of the tickets is on Michigan. And I think that just how good Michigan has played recently at plus money, even if it is only plus 112 currently, that is too tantalizing for me to pass up against the Texas A&M team that really doesn't scare you on offense.
Yeah, it's a good point. All right. That will be an interesting one to watch as well. I love when we get to this point in the season, gentlemen. It's just great basketball games, great matchups on both sides. 2 more to get to for Saturday. Let's move to Wisconsin and BYU. Big total expected here, 154.5. 2 offenses that have been rolling down the stretch of this season. Wisconsin, a slight favorite, minus 1.5 against the spread, minus 113 on the money line. You're still laying a little number with BYU, minus 108 on the money line as well. So essentially a pick 'em here. Doug, what do you got for this one?
Man, sit back and put your feet up and enjoy it. I think it's going to be really hard. And this is sort of, this is why the house makes money, right? They get the built-in hold percentage, obviously, but it's a really tough game. It's going to come right down to the wire. I don't think there's any sort of advantage. The Badgers at their best are the better team in my eyes. But BYU has been really, really solid. You just wonder if so much of that is their home court advantage throughout the course of the Big 12 season and the altitude and everything. And I was leaning BYU going into the game against VCU just because that game was also played in altitude. But both of these teams run really impressive sets. Everyone can hit shots. I just think it's going to be a really crisp game. I think the over-under, it makes a lot of sense. Being in the 150s. I would take the under if I had to, just because all you need is like a stretch of missed shots, or kind of like I alluded to with the Purdue game. If one team has an edge and needs to burn clock, sometimes you don't get the fouls at the end. And then you have sort of a larger, more ways to win on the under than the over. But I think it's really hard to pick a side on this. And, that's why you get out the Bet Rivers app and make a live bet after you get to see how they match up and the scheming. And I said this in the A&M Michigan game. It's a really tough turnaround for teams. It's a different animal in the tournament. That second game, the jitters play a big role for a lot of people. You just don't know how it's going to play out. I mean, I guess that's the case in any game. So, but I don't think there's really much to go on in my eyes in terms of matchups.
So this is a game out in the mountains in Denver. BYU, obviously, from a mountain-esque terrain. I don't know how far it is from Provo to Denver, but I assume it's closer than Madison, Wisconsin to Denver. I see this game going one of 2 ways. I see either an offensive clinic on both sides, where this is one of the most entertaining games of the entire first weekend. If that happens, great. Let's all enjoy it. Grab your popcorn. It's going to be a fun one. The other path that I see is that Wisconsin's offense doesn't get going and BYU runs them out of the gym. I think that's a distinct possibility here. This BYU team has been one of the best in the country over the last month. They went on a crazy run down the end of the Big 12 regular season. They made a run to the Big 12 championship game where they ultimately fell short to Houston. The only team that has really found repeated success against BYU this season is the Houston Cougars, obviously a 1 seed, one of the toughest teams in the country, a team that imposes their will on you with what they do defensively, forcing turnovers, getting into you, providing pressure. Wisconsin could not be more opposite from that. I mean, defensively, they're not slouches by any means, but it's just a defense that it wants to be in the right spot, lets you run your stuff, is not going to try and turn you over. That's the BYU offense's one big issue. They're outside the top 200 in turnover rate, but Wisconsin is 332nd nationally in defensive turnover rate. If you don't force BYU into some pressure-based situations, they've been picking defenses apart for the better part of the last 2 months. I think that's going to happen here. They're just too good. They're too sound. They've got Yegor Demon, who is an NBA lottery pick that looked excited for his first round matchup against BYU and was making shots. It was the best he's looked in months. But Richie Saunders is a true superstar. He honestly plays very similar to John Tonje to me, a guy that gets to the free throw line a ton, a guy that can score through contact, that can step back and make jumpers as well. So I think BYU's size can frustrate Tonje. We saw that against Michigan in the Big 10 championship game in the tournament where, you know, he wants to bully ball and get to the rim a little bit. And if you've got some trees down there, sometimes he just isn't as effective as he is against some of the middle of the pack teams in the country. BYU is pretty great inside. They're a great 2-point percentage defense. They're a great shot blocking team. They've got a bunch of big wings to throw at Tonje and Blackwell. I'm going to lean BYU here. Not even a lean. I'm going to play BYU aggressively here and hope that my hunch is right, that they kind of build a sustainable lead steady throughout this one. Troy, I'll throw it to you. What insights can you add for us on this matchup?
Well, if this game were taking place 8 to 10 years ago, this would be the ultimate styles make fights. And it's hard for me to not think that that's still the case, even though Wisconsin, formerly a plodding, slow, burn offense team that really wanted to play in the 40s, and BYU for the last 20 years has been a let's get to 90 plus if we can, and we're going to shoot the lights out of the gym. Wisconsin has really started to adapt that philosophy. I still can't help but think that just the tournament is going to slow things down. These guys are going to try to, if there is a run, a player is going to try to make 6 points in one basket, which we know is not a thing that happens. I think this is going to be a fascinating game. This is definitely, of all the 4 games, the one that has the most live betting potential, because I think right now it's, basically a pick 'em. So you can get increased odds early on if a team gets down 6-0. And get good plus money there. Potentially, if it's BYU plus 175, that would look a whole lot nicer, because the second half is it's a whole different game. The betting public at Bet Rivers has kind of been split, and it's a little bit all over the map. So it's hard to really determine which way the public is thinking. 80% of the money and 50% of the tickets are on Wisconsin to win, but 57% of the money and 69% of the tickets are on BYU to cover. It's just 1.5 points, so it's really tough. The prices there are so similar. 58% of the money is on the under, and 95% of the tickets are on the over. And like you mentioned with BYU struggling with Houston, 4 of BYU's last 5 games have gone over the total points line. That one game that didn't was Houston, which, historically holds teams to under 50 points. Wisconsin has won 11 of their last 12 against non-conference play, and they've won 11 straight. Won the first half in 11 straight. So I think there are a lot of trends here, but this is just a game you're going to have to sit back and enjoy. There's not much that I would be biting on. This is going to be one where I'm eagerly anticipating something to happen in the first half that you can pounce on in live, and then hope that the second half plays out like so many of the games on Thursday did when the other team storms back.
High on intrigue, high on entertainment value, high on live betting potential per Troy Machir here. Okay, one more game on Saturday. UCLA taking on Tennessee. UCLA plus 160 as a dog on the money line. Tennessee minus 4.5 at Bet Rivers, minus 205 on the money line. Our total is 133.5. Doug, what do you think?
I think this is one of those cases where a team looked really good in the first round, and they're going to look very different in the second round because of the opponent, and that's the Bruins. I think they're in for a really tough matchup. Now, I don't love this Vols team. I ended up picking them Final Four because that's Midwest region's the only one I have with, sort of mini chaos. But I've just never been a believer in this UT sort of program to win it all, because I think at some point the offensive execution or lack thereof will do them in. I just don't think the Bruins are the opponent for that. I think UCLA took advantage of a team from a weak conference, and they just pummeled Utah State, which I expected. I think the Mountain West is a little shaky, to say the least, after we've seen. I do like Colorado State and everything, but who handled their business against Utah State in the tournament, conference tournament. But in terms of UCLA, look, we know their defense, their offense is shaky. I just think they're going to run into a buzzsaw that is the UT defense. And on the Bet Rivers, you can do sort of like a combo parlay, a prop, if you will, game winner in total points, plus 170, which pays considerably better than a conventional parlay. So the prop offered is maybe a boost or something. I like that. I think this game goes under. I don't think UCLA scores many points. You can even throw in the spread if you want to chop that up. I think this is the Vols game to sort of manhandle, but I think it'll be a fun game. It won't be many points. It's the last game on Saturday night, and it's a good sort of way to finish off a long day and a fun day of basketball. But I think the Bruins are going to have a really tough time getting their offense going, as much as I think of Mick Cronin. And I like the Bruins a lot, and he's made some runs. We know that even Sweet 16 is sort of a given. I just think it's a really tough matchup for UCLA.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you here. UCLA was probably licking their chops at the Utah State matchup in round one and probably rolling their eyes at the Tennessee potential in round two. Tennessee is just, in a lot of ways very similar to UCLA. These are two teams predicated on defense, physicality, athleticism, a lot of different bodies that they can throw at you in the perimeter. It's going to be a battle, almost a war, right? And UCLA has done a great job in some of their biggest games this season, I think, being the tougher basketball team. You are probably not going to out-tough Tennessee. It's very rare that has happened in the last 5 years under Rick Barnes. I think you've almost got to make some shots from outside to beat this Tennessee team. And that's a problem for UCLA. They shoot it well enough from three, but they don't want to shoot many threes. They're only 253rd in three-point attempt rate. Both of these defenses are actually very low in limiting three-point attempts. Schematically, it's something they'll live with as long as they get a good contest. But I expect Tennessee to kind of win the math in this basketball game. They're much more willing to get hot from outside. Chaz Lanier is a guy that's certainly high volume from out there. He had a great game in game one of this tournament. We're just a few months removed from the Chaz Lanier-Dalton Connect comparisons. I don't think I would go there, but Lanier does sort of have a big game, can carry his team to wins in the NCAA tournament vibe to him in a way that I just don't believe anybody on UCLA's roster has. Two great defenses, one team with a superstar, one team that's going to shoot more threes than the other. You add that up, it's enough for me to feel comfortable backing Tennessee to cover -4.5 in this spot. Troy, what can you add for us here?
The over-under at 133.5, I want to agree with you guys. As soon as I saw this matchup, it reeks under no matter what the line was. But here's the interesting thing. There's some trends that suggest it might go over, which is a shock because these two teams, the coaches, their philosophies, their players, everything dictates or indicates this should be an under. But, Tennessee has scored 70 points, at least 70 points in 7 straight games. And each of Tennessee's last 7 games have produced a total of 135 or more. This is a team that, has All-Americans, has scorers. I don't know how fast the pace of play in this game is going to be. One really interesting little nugget here is 2 of UCLA's last 3 NCAA tournament games, when they're the lower seed, have gone into overtime. I could see this game being very, very close. You get to overtime, worst thing to happen for an under's better. Here's the thing. 66% of the money and 70% of the tickets is on the over. I'm a little surprised that because of the identities of these two teams for more than a year have indicated defense. And, in the tournament, we get a lot of casual bettors at Bet Rivers, and there is a lot of historical betting that goes on, going off what you know from last year, what you know from the year before. It's why Utah State was so heavily bet against UCLA, is because people remember Utah State having some decent runs. They go off that. They have to pick a 10 seed, yada, yada. But I think this is going to be potentially a game that goes slightly over. I don't think it's going to be a barn burner, but I could see it being a total 138, and that is over by 4.5 points. Right now, this is the only game that is decisive in the eyes of the bettors at Bet Rivers. Even though it's not super strong, but every side is on Tennessee. 62% of the money and 77% of the tickets on the Vols to win. 90% of the money and 75% of the tickets on the Vols to cover. And then, as I mentioned, 66% of the money, 70% of the tickets on the over.
We'll say, as a Vols backer who respects Mick Cronin, I certainly don't like that everybody's on Tennessee here. That never makes me feel good, especially in the postseason. All right. Well, thank you, Troy. Thank you, Doug. Let's go around the horn real quickly. Let's give a best bet for Saturday. Anything that we discussed. Doug, what's your favorite play of the day?
I would say the under in the Michigan A&M game. I just really think the blueprint and sort of game plan of the Aggies to shoot an offensive rebound is just not conducive to the Wolverines' front line. But A&M will lock down and play defense. And yes, there's always a chance of crazy fouling. We saw that on Thursday with 20 points in the final minute in the Clemson McNeese State game, or whatever that number was. That's gonna happen. But outside of that, I just don't see both offenses having this incredible fluidity and shot making against these defenses. It's just a really big number. So I'll take under 140.5 for Michigan and A&M.
I think that's a good play as well. I'm going to go back to my BYU Cougars here. I think this team is just on a different plane right now than what I've seen from Wisconsin since that weird Penn State loss at the end of the regular season. They've been up and down. BYU has largely just been up until they run into Houston. They have punked every single team they've played, including Iowa State twice. I don't think Wisconsin's sort of conservative defensive approach is going to cause much resistance for the BYU offense. I will take the Cougars on the money line to win that game. Reminder, with Bet Rivers, check out the house specials page for daily boosted bets and special props for the NCAA tournament. For Doug Kezirian, for Troy Machir, I'm Greg Waddell. Enjoy Saturday of the NCAA tournament. We will have more best bets for you on the next episode of The 10.
Thanks for watching College Sports Rushes the 10 on the Bet Rivers Network.